faithfully delivering value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Club. Today we're going to discuss the book The High Performance Coach by John Whitmore. When we talk about coaches, we usually think of tennis coaches, soccer coaches, basketball coaches, and so on. If you want to learn tennis, you definitely find a professional tennis coach who teaches you the basics, how to serve, return, and approach the net. And if you're copying the coach and doing it wrong, they'll correct your mistakes and have you repeat the drills over and over. Hmm. Sports enthusiasts should be quite familiar with this experience. But what if your tennis coach told you that they don't actually play tennis, that they're a skiing instructor, but they claim they can make you a tennis pro? Do you think that's possible? Would you accept such a coach? Most people probably wouldn't believe it, thinking it's a joke. However, the book's author, Whitmore, says it's actually legit. He had such a personal experience. Back in the 1970s, Whitmore and Timothy Galway, an educator from Harvard University, started a tennis training program. With so many signups and not enough tennis coaches, they brought in two skiing instructors as substitutes. Whitmore initially had low expectations, but surprisingly, their students progressed faster than those taught by professional tennis coaches. Facing this unexpected outcome, Whitmore and Galway conducted an in-depth study. They discovered the skiing coaches succeeded precisely because they knew little about tennis. Unable to spot technical errors, they could only ask questions. For example, how do you perceive the ball's spin? When do you initiate movement? Which body part generates power? These questions forced students to focus and identify problems themselves. The learning became student-driven, unleashing their athletic potential and accelerating progress. This revealed to Whitmore and Galway that coaching isn't about imparting expertise, but unlocking potential. Students aren't empty vessels waiting to be filled with knowledge. They're more like seeds containing the potential to grow into mighty trees. When coaches help students discover problems independently, they gain the ability to solve them and improve performance. Based on this insight, Galway and Whitmore pioneered a question-based coaching model called the inner game, revolutionizing sports. Later, Whitmore expanded this model to the business world, helping managers cultivate employees to boost performance. Today, 80% of Fortune 500 companies use coaching techniques, and coaching has become a popular course at top universities like Harvard and Yale. And now, nearly all outstanding business coaches were either students of Whitmore and Galway or deeply influenced by them. Due to Whitmore's remarkable achievements, the International Coach Federation awarded him the highest honor, the President's Award for High Performance Coaching. This book has been reprinted 4 times, translated into 22 languages, and listed as one of the most influential business coaching books in the past 2 decades. Today, I'll use 3 questions to unpack the essence of this book for you. First, what is the focus of coaching questions? Second, how to ask effective questions. Third, what is the sequence of coaching questions? Let's start with the first question. What is the focus of coaching questions? From the earlier story, you might have noticed that the skiing coach's questions were very deliberate. They weren't just casual chat or a test. Their questions actually centered on 2 key points. First, to enhance the student's awareness. Second, to increase the student's sense of responsibility. What is awareness? It means knowing what's happening around you. For example, when someone steps out in the morning and sees fallen leaves everywhere, they know autumn has arrived. That's awareness. For instance, a manager at year-end knows that old clients are decreasing while new ones are increasing. That's also awareness. There's another type called self-awareness, which means knowing what you're experiencing. For example, an investor realizes their trading strategy isn't adapting to market changes lately. That's self-awareness. Awareness has many levels. Those with high awareness are like holding a magnifying glass, clearly seeing hidden facts, details, and their own irrational emotions or mistaken beliefs. They can easily self-improve. If someone has low awareness, even if you directly tell them the facts and problems, they'll struggle to improve. The best way is to boost their awareness so they can discover problems themselves. For instance, a designer creates a renovation plan, the client is dissatisfied, and the manager tells them to reduce storage space and add some ambiance. What would the designer think? He might resist. Why should he design according to your ideas? Or he might think, the manager said so, so I'll just do it. If the plan succeeds, he'll think, the leader is wise. I should consult them first next time. This creates dependency, preventing self-growth. But if the manager had asked questions to guide the designer in understanding where it went wrong when the plan was first rejected, the outcome would be entirely different. For example, the manager could ask about the client's background and future plans, encouraging the designer to communicate with the client and discover the answers themselves. Eventually, the designer realizes that analyzing the client's needs is what truly matters. Next time, he won't make plans based solely on his own wishes behind closed doors. That's the charm of awareness. It lets learners find problems and solutions themselves. The second key point is to increase the learner's sense of responsibility. We all have a sense of responsibility for what we do, but this responsibility varies in strength. If something is imposed by others, responsibility is low. There's resistance and it's done half-heartedly. If it's something he chose himself, he'll feel ashamed if he doesn't do it well and will do everything possible to succeed. Let's take an example. In a house repair scenario, the first team's supervisor orders Xiao Long, there's a ladder in room 102. Go get it. Xiao Long thinks, I'm busy too. Why not ask someone else? How much responsibility can he feel for this task? He might go to room 102, look around, and come back if he doesn't see the ladder. The supervisor gets angry and scolds Xiao Long. If it's not in 102, why didn't you look elsewhere? Xiao Wang feels even more wronged after being yelled at. You're the one who remembered wrong. Why take it out on me? In contrast, the second team supervisor did it this way. Dee would ask, I think there's a ladder in room 102. Who can go get it? The person who volunteers chooses that responsibility. Even if there's no ladder in 102, he'll look elsewhere because he took on the task voluntarily. The first supervisor imposed responsibility on the worker with no choice, resulting in low responsibility. He does it resentfully and blames the supervisor if it fails. The second supervisor, through questioning, gives the choice of responsibility to the worker. Once the worker chooses it themselves, responsibility becomes strong, and they find ways to complete the task excellently. That's why sales companies don't assign sales quotas, but let salespeople set their own targets. Remember, when employees choose to take responsibility themselves, they'll definitely do a better job. So far, we've learned that the focus of coaching questions is to enhance awareness and responsibility. So how should a coach pose questions? Are there any requirements? In Whitmore's view, coaching questions must be effective questions. Next, let's discuss the second part. What is an effective question? Overall, it has two characteristics. First, it requires giving specific information through observation, recollection, and thinking. For example, a manager might ask an employee, what problems did you encounter in this project? Which requires an answer. The employee must carefully recall, think, and review their work from start to finish to summarize the problems encountered. The second characteristic is to avoid criticism or questioning that might hurt the learner's self-esteem and cause resistance. For instance, a supervisor tells a subordinate, "What were you even thinking with the project turning out like this?" This appears to be a question, but is actually criticism, placing the blame for the project's failure on the subordinate and questioning their ability. At this point, the subordinate feels their self-esteem is hurt and starts making excuses to defend themselves. Based on these two characteristics, we can divide effective questions into three types. The first type is open-ended questions. Second type is questions that focus on details. The third type is questions that uncover blind spots. Let's see how each enhances awareness and responsibility. First, open-ended questions are the opposite of closed-ended questions. Closed-ended questions are like multiple choice, requiring only a yes or no answer. For example, a manager asks, "Is the project finished?" The possible answers are only done or not done. That's a closed-ended question. The subordinate answers, "Not done." Does this answer provide any information? It doesn't guide them to find problems or solutions, does it? Nor does it lead to open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are like fill in the blanks, requiring explanation. For example, in the above scenario, we change the question. What part of the project are you responsible for? What difficulties have you encountered? The subordinate will recall the project's progress. Think about where their problems lie. This process simultaneously enhances awareness and responsibility. The second type of effective question focuses on details. When a coach's question focuses on details, the student must concentrate to observe and think, providing specific information in response. For example, if there's a red flower over there, you ask the student, "What color is the flower?" He glances and tells you, "Red." His observation stays superficial, showing low awareness. But if you then ask, "What specific shade of red is it? Has it always been this exact color?" To answer, he might pull out color charts, carefully compare and discover it's actually rose red. He might even set up a camera to film the flower all day and review the footage, discovering that at dawn it's vermilion, turning to begonia red by noon. Through this process, he observes more specific details, elevating his awareness to a higher level. The third type of effective question uncovers blind spots. Blind spots often hide in the learner's weaknesses, hard for them to recognize, like an employee repeatedly making errors in certain tasks. Here, the supervisor might ask, "Which step do you spend the least time on?" The employee lists their workflow and may discover a neglected step. This overlooked step causes frequent errors. The supervisor's question helped reveal the blind spot. All right, now we understand. To become a high-performance coach, you need to ask effective questions. Effective questions have two key features and fall into three categories: open-ended, detail-focused, and blind spot uncovering. Next, we need to address, in what sequence should these questions be asked? This brings us to the third part of today's discussion. Whitmore introduces the GROW model in this book. This model sequences questioning into four stages: goal setting, reality check, options, and will action. The first letters spell GROW. Starting with goal setting, begin by asking the student about their objectives. Goals are categorized as final outcomes or performance targets. The ultimate goal is a vision, a dream. Sometimes it's a long-term goal that the student can't fully control, like becoming number one in the industry. Performance goals are phased and can be controlled by the student, such as increasing market share by 10% this year. If we compare the ultimate goal to the pinnacle of a pyramid, performance goals are its foundation. Setting performance goals is to support the ultimate goal. Let's give an example. At the Olympics, a previous champion's dream is to win another gold medal, which inspires him to strive. But whether he can win the gold isn't entirely under his control. There are always dark horses at the Olympics. If he encounters one in the preliminaries who outperforms him, the gap could instantly shatter his confidence, making him feel the ultimate goal is impossible. But if he sets a performance goal, like achieving his personal best, then no matter how the dark horses perform in the preliminaries, it won't affect his confidence. His focus is on achieving his personal best, which is a goal he's more confident in reaching. By focusing on this goal, he has a better chance of winning gold. That's the role of performance goals. So, as a coach, you must ensure the student clarifies their ultimate goal. At the same time, the student should set a performance goal they're confident in. As coaches, how do we determine if a student's performance goal is good or bad? A good performance goal should have two characteristics. It must be positively described and specifically measurable. The first characteristic is that the goal must be positively described. For example, increase daily active users by 50%. A positively described goal makes people focus on success, and focusing on success leads to actual success. If you set a negatively described goal, like don't decrease daily active users, he focuses on decrease as failure, and focusing on failure leads to actual failure. Let's give another example. If you tell a student, don't think about a red balloon, their mind will immediately think of a red balloon. Negative description focuses attention on things you don't want to focus on. We don't want them to think about a red balloon, but they often think of it first thing. The second characteristic of a good performance goal is that it's specific and measurable, meaning the goal is stated with data and facts, clearly defining what to do and what results to achieve. If it's too abstract to measure, you can't control the goal. For example, if a student's ultimate goal is to become a department manager and they set their performance goal as working like a manager and behaving like a manager, such a performance goal is abstract. The concepts of how a manager handles work or behaves are vague. If we adjust the performance goal to, say, exceeding tasks by 30%, proposing 3 improvement plans for the team, and providing 50 hours of training for new employees. These performance goals are specific, measurable, and relatively easy to implement. All right, that concludes the first stage of goal setting. Before conducting a coaching session, you need to help the student clarify the ultimate goal and performance goals. The ultimate goal defines the direction and serves as motivation. Performance goals define the process and work content. The performance goals are key to achieving the ultimate goal. They have two characteristics. One is positive description, and the other is specific and measurable. After setting the goals, the next stage is to analyze the current situation. Most people have distorted observations of reality due to inner biases, hopes, fears, or inherent viewpoints and judgments, which prevent them from seeing the truth. Therefore, the focus of the coach's questions in the second stage is to enhance the student's awareness and help them understand reality objectively. At this stage, the coach needs the student to provide descriptive answers rather than evaluative answers. For example, if a student says, "I didn't perform well," such an answer is evaluative. Whereas if they say, "My budget missed the insurance cost," that answer is descriptive. The answer reflects the student's subjective view. Descriptive answers are more likely to approach the objective reality. So, in this stage, coaches often use questions with words like what, when, where, who, and how much. For instance, the coach might ask the student, "What obstacles did you encounter in this project?" Or "Which part consumed the most energy?" Another point to note in this stage is that the coach's questions need to follow the student's thinking and interests. Otherwise, the answers you get might be false facts. Let's give an example. Amy is a senior manager who is coaching Duke's team to solve efficiency issues. If Amy immediately steers the conversation toward her own concerns, regardless of Duke's interest, how would Duke react? He would instantly become defensive, suspect Amy's motives, and hesitate to say much. Another possibility is that Duke might cater to Amy's preferences, guessing what answer she wants to hear and saying that. These are completely unhelpful for understanding the current situation. But if Amy first follows Duke's thinking and acknowledges his views, it will make Duke feel she's on his side. So he trusts her, actively shares his understanding of the problem, and seeks her help. All right, that's all for the second stage. The coach has helped the student set goals and understand their current situation. And so, what action plans can move us from the current situation to the goal? The third stage of the GROW model, the option stage, is meant to solve this problem. Note, the choice here isn't about picking one correct answer, but unleashing creativity to list as many alternative options as possible. At this point, the biggest obstacle limiting the student's creativity is negative assumptions. For example, this can't be done. The client will never agree. We don't have time. Costs are too high. Not enough staff. Competitors have done it, and so on. When the student is stuck in negative assumptions, a good coach should ask questions to help them imagine handling the problem under various conditions. For instance, what if you had enough budget? Or what if you had sufficient staff? If that obstacle didn't exist, how would you do it? Through such questions, the student's creative thinking is stimulated. In practice, the coach might have unique insights and solutions the student can't think of. Should the coach directly tell them? Of course not. The best approach is when the student's ideas run dry to say, I have some other options. Want to hear them? If the student refuses, the coach should wait for them to think further on their own. If the student agrees, the coach must clarify that suggestions are for reference only and the choice is in the student's hands. After the student lists enough alternative options, the coach's job is to help pick the best one from them. Often in business, situations are complex, and combining two or three options is the best choice. With the best plan in hand, it's time to take action. This is also the fourth stage of the GROW model. In the action stage, the coach's aim shifts the focus from discussion to decision making. What to do, when, who will do it, and whose will it is. At this stage, a plan will be formed and directly drive action. Without action, coaching is just empty talk. Action here includes elements like time, location, and personnel. At this stage, the coach typically asks, what will you do? When do you plan to take this action? And will it achieve your goal? What difficulties might you encounter during implementation? What support do you need and when will you obtain it, etc.? GROW model. The focus of the fourth stage is securing the student's commitment, which is crucial. Only when they create an action plan and commit will they execute it. Well, that concludes our discussion of the high performance coach. Let's briefly review the three key parts. First, a coach's work is to enhance awareness and responsibility. Improved awareness helps students discover problems and solve them. Increased responsibility makes students acknowledge their duties and find ways to fulfill them. Second, coaches can only enhance awareness and responsibility through effective questions. Effective questions avoid judgment and require concrete answers. Effective questions fall into three categories: open-ended questions and detail-focused questions. The third category is blind spot discovery questions. Finally, we introduce the GROW model. The GROW model divides coaching into four stages: goal setting, reality check, options, and will action. Managers using coaching techniques can help employees unlock potential and achieve high performance. The key lies in questioning skills. This requires managers to continually practice in real-world situations. In your next meeting, try skipping long speeches and start with an effective question. All right, that's our interpretation of the high performance coach. Reading notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.